I used to believe my devotion to God was unshakable. From the moment I learned to speak, I recited Quranic verses, studied the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, and clung to the promise that if I prayed enough, fasted correctly, and avoided major sins, I'd secure a place among the righteous. But I never imagined that a single heartbeat, one medical emergency, could thrust me into a realm that defied every assumption I had about my faith. My name is Mohammed, and this is the story of the day I discovered that everything I thought I knew was only part of a much bigger truth. Growing up, my world revolved around the adhan calling me to prayer 5 times a day. I can still remember the melody echoing through my childhood home at dawn, gently waking me to start my day with the remembrance of God. My parents laid a solid foundation. They taught me that Islam wasn't just a label, it was a way of life. Every motion, from washing before prayer to the final taslim, carried weight. The local mosque was my second home, a place where I found solace in the measured recitation of the Quran. On weekends, I attended classes led by patient scholars who explained the hadiths in detail. They dissected each verse, teaching me how to interpret the words of the Prophet Muhammad for practical use. I relished those sessions, certain that knowledge of faith was the greatest shield against doubt. And yet, late at night, I sometimes found myself wondering if I was doing enough. What if I missed a prayer, or if my intentions weren't perfectly pure? Islam taught me that God was merciful, but it also stressed accountability for every action. Those moments of questioning never lasted long. I'd bury them under more prayer and more study. Still, they would return, like stubborn embers that refused to die out. Despite my confidence in Islam, I always had a quiet fascination with Christianity. Part of it was simple curiosity. How could a faith so widespread rest on a concept like the Trinity, which seemed so illogical to me? I enjoyed having debates with Christian classmates, where I'd highlight verses from the Quran that described God's oneness. I'd argue passionately that Jesus was just a prophet, an honored one, but still a man. The idea that he could be God's son felt, in my eyes, like a misunderstanding carried over centuries. My Christian friends would talk about grace, about how no one could earn salvation, it was given. I typically saw that as a convenient shortcut, undermining the value of righteous deeds. I never mocked them outright, but inside I felt certain they were missing the profound balance that Islam offered, the synergy of faith and good works. Yet a kernel of curiosity remained. After all, billions of people believed in Jesus as more than a prophet. Could every one of them be deceived? I never dwelled on it too much. I was firmly rooted in my own convictions. Still, the question lingered in the back of my mind, a faint whisper urging me not to dismiss what I didn't fully understand. During one of my visits to see extended family, I woke up for far feeling as strong and steady as ever. I spent the early hours reviewing some Quranic verses with my younger cousin. The morning was ordinary, comforting in its routine, a cup of tea, some good conversation, and a sense of contentment. By midday, I noticed a slight pressure in my chest but assumed it was nothing serious. I took a short walk, hoping fresh air would clear my discomfort. By late afternoon, however, the twinge evolved into a fierce, stabbing pain. Each inhale felt like I was trying to breathe through shards of glass. My cousin panicked, urging me to see a doctor immediately. I waved him off, insisting I'd be fine, but the pain kept intensifying until I couldn't even stand upright. Within an hour, we were rushing to the nearest hospital. The emergency room staff quickly hooked me up to monitors and performed tests with urgency that made my heart pound even harder. When the doctor came back with grim eyes, uttering words like severe heart attack, my mind spun. I was too young, too careful with my health for such a thing, wasn't I? I prayed silently, counting on my devotion to shield me from a worst-case scenario. But with each passing minute, I sensed that my usual shield wasn't going to save me from the physical reality unraveling inside my chest. My breath grew shallow, the machines beeped louder, and I felt my consciousness begin to slip. In that moment, every theological debate I'd ever engaged in seemed trivial. All that mattered was facing the possibility that I might die before sundown. Suddenly, everything went dark. At first, it felt like falling asleep, only heavier, deeper, more final. Then, as though awakening from a dream, I realized I was still there, just not in my physical form. I found myself hovering above the hospital bed. The scene below felt both surreal and crystal clear. Doctors shouting orders, nurses checking vitals, and my cousin watching, pale and trembling. Oddly, I felt no fear. Instead, an odd calm filled me, like I was observing a movie scene. I wondered if I had died. I remembered the Islamic teachings about the moment of death, about angels who come to guide the soul, but nothing in my childhood lessons had prepared me for this sensation. There was no immediate judgment, no sense of being dragged anywhere. It was just me, a silent witness to my own potential passing. That's when I saw it. A flicker of light in the corner of my vision. It grew rapidly, taking on a radiance unlike anything I'd seen. My first instinct was to resist. It felt like stepping into an unknown dimension. But the light seemed to call me, not with a voice but with a profound pull that reached into whatever essence I had in that moment. Resistance proved futile. I felt myself drifting closer, enveloped by a warmth that was more than heat. It was strangely comforting, almost loving. As the hospital room vanished from view, I surrendered to the pull of that light, unsure what lay beyond. I felt as if I was passing through a tunnel of pure brightness. Yet it didn't hurt my eyes. If anything, it felt like it was healing me from the inside out. My entire being tingled with a mix of awe and anticipation. And then I emerged into a space that defied my understanding of color or dimension. It was brighter than the sun but oddly gentle, as though it glowed from an infinite reservoir of compassion. In the midst of that brilliance, a figure appeared. At first, it was just a silhouette against the sea of light, but then details began to resolve. I sensed overwhelming love radiating from him, and in a whisper that seemed to echo throughout my mind, I heard a voice say, "Peace be with you. I am Jesus." My heart thundered, or whatever semblance of a heart I had in that form. This contradicted everything I believed about Jesus, that he was a revered prophet but not divine. Yet here he stood with an authority so immense I felt undone. Somehow, I knew he saw every fragment of my being, every question I'd ever buried, every fear I'd ever suppressed. Yet I perceived no condemnation in him, only love, deep and fathomless. For a moment, I wanted to argue, "But you're only a prophet in Islam. How can this be?" But words failed me. Instead, scenes appeared around us, like living visions. I saw Jesus healing people, displaying miracles I'd read about in the Quran. Then came the moments I'd long dismissed, the crucifixion, the significance of grace, and the claim of resurrection. A swirl of images left me breathless, if such a term even applied in that state. I wanted to refute them with all the arguments I'd honed, but they crumbled under the weight of what I was witnessing. Before I could ask the questions spinning in my mind, the space around us shifted. I found myself standing in a realm so beautiful it brought tears to my eyes. Everything shimmered with indescribable color and harmony. I sensed peace woven into the very atmosphere. It wasn't just a place. It felt like a living presence of joy. Instinctively, I knew this was heaven, a state of perfect unity with God's love. I felt awe washing over me in waves. My life had been about striving, fasting properly, giving zakat, praying at the correct times. Yet here, I sensed that nothing I could do would ever be enough to create such perfection. It was sheer gift, pulsing with divine love. Before I could fully absorb it, the vision shifted again, and I was plunged into a dreadful darkness. Anguished cries echoed through a void so hollow it chilled me. I glimpsed silhouettes reaching out in despair. This was no fiery torment. It was the absence of hope, a place stripped of God's presence. I somehow understood these souls had chosen to reject the light freely offered. Hell, I thought, and the sorrow I felt watching them was overwhelming. Jesus' voice filled the silence. "You see," he seemed to say without words, "why I gave my life for you." The realization knocked the breath out of me. Hell wasn't about an angry God wanting to punish. It was the result of turning away from divine love. That simple message shattered my previous notions. In that timeless space, Jesus confronted me with a choice. Did I accept that he was more than I'd believed, that through him God offered love and salvation I could never earn? Or would I hold tight to my old convictions and risk missing the completeness of God's plan? My soul trembled with the magnitude of that decision. I recalled all my debates, my confidence in Islamic scholarship, my unwavering stance that Christianity was flawed. Yet here I stood, undone by a presence so real and loving that denial seemed impossible. Despite my confusion, I felt peace urging me forward. "I trust you," I said, or thought, or prayed. Words felt flimsy, but my surrender was genuine. The moment I did, light surged around me like a gentle embrace. I felt free from the weight of proving my worth to God. It was as if I'd been carrying a ledger of good deeds all my life, hoping they would outweigh my sins, only to find that God's love was never something I could purchase with devotion. It was, and is, a gift. Jesus then told me I had to return. My journey in this realm wasn't finished. "Share what you have seen," I sensed him instruct me, his voice resonating with concern for those who remain in the dark. I didn't want to leave. I feared returning to the pain in that hospital. But I felt pulled away, as though gently guided back through a tunnel. Darkness descended once more, but not the menacing darkness I had felt earlier. This was the darkness of reawakening to the material world. I gasped awake to fluorescent lights and urgent chatter. A nurse almost dropped the clipboard in shock. "He's back," someone shouted. My chest ached, and I could hear machines pinging around me, but my mind was light years away, still reeling from what I'd experienced. The doctors said it was a miracle I'd stabilized. One moment my heart was failing, the next it was beating steadily again. My family clung to me with tears of relief. They thanked God I was alive, repeating Alhamdulillah under their breaths. But I could barely speak. How could I possibly explain that I'd encountered Jesus, glimpsed heaven, and understood grace in a way that defied everything I thought I knew? In the days that followed, I spent my recovery in physical rest but mental upheaval. Night after night, I replayed the visions, the warmth, the unimaginable sense of love. I flipped through the Quran, searching for confirmations I might have overlooked. I ventured online, reading passages from the Bible I'd once dismissed. Everything felt different, more alive. Words about grace and redemption took on a new weight, matching what I had witnessed in that luminous realm. When I finally began telling close friends about my experience, reactions ranged from intrigued skepticism to outright denial. "You were delusional," some insisted. "Stress does that." Others wanted to believe me but found the idea that Jesus could be more than a prophet too big a leap. My family members were torn. They loved me but hated the sense that I might be veering away from the faith that shaped our entire identity. My father, a devout man who always cherished my dedication to Islam, looked wounded when I tried to convey even a fraction of what I'd seen. Despite the tension, I couldn't stay silent. Jesus had told me to share this, and with every hesitant word I spoke, I felt a surge of courage. Small groups began to gather in my hospital room just to hear my story. Some left shaking their heads. Others lingered, asking questions about what that love felt like, about whether my deeds truly didn't matter anymore. I explained as best I could. It wasn't that deeds were worthless. It was that no matter how many good deeds we accumulate, they cannot buy God's love, because it's already been offered freely. As I grew stronger, I found solace among a handful of people, both Muslims and Christians, who were open to hearing how my perspective had changed. I dove deeper into studying the Bible, cross-referencing passages that spoke of Jesus as the promised Messiah, a fulfillment rather than a contradiction of certain Islamic prophecies. Every discovery felt like a puzzle piece clicking into place. It wasn't an easy path. By speaking up, I risked losing relationships. I had to accept that some would see me as a traitor. Still, my conviction only grew stronger each time I recounted my near-death encounter and the absolute love I sensed in Jesus' presence. Yes, I treasured my upbringing in Islam. It nurtured in me a profound reverence for God. But now I see that reverence expanded by grace, not replaced. Grace made me realize that I didn't have to scramble every day to be worthy. God already loved me so intensely that He offered me a way to live free from the crushing burden of perfection. Eventually, I regained enough strength to stand before a small crowd in my community center. People who'd caught word of my strange story. My heart pounded, but I felt Jesus' gentle reassurance echo in my mind. I shared every detail, from feeling the sting in my chest to seeing the radiant figure who called himself Jesus. I explained the peace of heaven and the horrifying emptiness of hell. Some people walked out, whispering about hallucinations. But a few stayed behind, tears in their eyes, wondering if they, too, might be missing something bigger in their understanding of God. In private, I grappled with the sorrow that some of my closest friends had distanced themselves from me. A few even launched angry tirades, accusing me of abandoning Islam. Yet I discovered that my story offered hope to others who had questions but feared exploring them. A neighbor, after hearing about my experience, secretly confided that he'd long suspected there was more to Jesus than what we'd been taught. Another acquaintance said my testimony gave her the courage to read the Bible for the first time, discovering parallels with the Quran that she had never considered. I don't see my encounter as a repudiation of everything I learned in Islam. Rather, it's an evolution, a completion of the questions that haunted me for years. All those nights wondering if my deeds would ever be enough. All those debates about whether God's mercy might extend beyond a strict accounting of good and bad. What I saw, what I felt, convinced me that God's love is beyond measurement, poured out through Jesus so that no one has to wonder if they've done enough. That realization changed the entire trajectory of my life. I began forming small study groups that read both the Quran and the Bible, letting the texts speak. People came with curiosity, skepticism, or even fear, but often left pondering the idea that maybe, just maybe, Jesus is more than we once believed. I learned to speak of unity rather than discord. We share many of the same prophets, the same moral framework, the same awe for the Creator. Could it be that Jesus was the key, linking what we knew to what we needed to discover? My family's reactions continued to evolve. My father openly struggled with the sense of losing me to another religion, but over time he softened enough to let me speak without cutting me off. My mother quietly listened, torn between love for me and devotion to tradition. My younger sister was bolder. Late one evening, she asked, "Did you really see heaven? Was it real?" I tried to convey the beauty I'd witnessed, that swirl of unimaginable color and the wave of unconditional love, but words could never fully capture it. She listened in silent wonder. As my story spread, I braced for outright hostility. Yet amid the criticism, I kept encountering people hungry for a truth they couldn't quite articulate. I heard from a young man who admitted he'd always felt a hollow space in his life, despite being outwardly devout. He asked if maybe Jesus was the missing piece. I didn't push him for a decision. I just told him my story and encouraged him to seek sincerely. God meets us where we are, I said, recalling my own moment of desperation on the hospital bed. As I stand here now, I do so with a heart lighter than ever before. I still respect the discipline I learned in Islam. It shaped me, gave me a framework to approach God with humility and devotion. Yet I can't deny the profound gift Jesus showed me. Grace, the love I cannot earn but can freely accept. That love doesn't erase accountability or moral responsibility. It transforms the motive behind them. Instead of living in fear, I choose to live in gratitude for what's already been done for me. I've faced losses, friendships, community ties, but I've also gained a peace that far outweighs the cost. Sometimes I wake before dawn, out of habit, to pray in the stillness. Now, though, my prayers aren't driven by a sense of frantic duty. They're filled with a humble awe for a God who would reach across my stubborn certainties, show me the reality of Jesus, and draw me into a grace that surpasses every theological argument I once clung to. My journey isn't over. I suspect it never will be. Each day brings new questions, new trials, and new opportunities to share my testimony. Yet every time I speak, I remember that moment in the radiant light, Jesus' eyes full of compassion, the warmth of his presence bathing me in a love beyond human understanding. That memory fuels my resolve to keep going, even when I'm misunderstood or criticized. Today, I walk in faith like never before. Not a faith rooted purely in ritual, but a faith anchored by love, the kind of love that Jesus revealed to me in that realm beyond physical life. I'm still learning what it means day by day, but I can't deny that it has brought me a rest my soul had never known. Gone is the restless need to earn favor with the Almighty. In its place stands a quiet assurance that I am loved, and that this love is available to all who dare to step into it. So I share my story with you, not to condemn anyone's beliefs or spark division, but to offer a glimpse into how God found me in my moment of crisis. If you're struggling, if you lie awake at night with doubts gnawing at your mind, I invite you to do what I did: search. Open your heart, study the scriptures, and pray earnestly for clarity. I believe that if you sincerely knock, the door will be opened. My name is Mohammed, and I once thought I had all the answers. Now, I've realized that true faith isn't about having every answer, but about trusting the one who does. Thank you for listening. If my journey resonates with you, I urge you to seek your own encounter with God's grace. It may just lead you to a truth that changes everything. If this story resonates with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspirational content. Together, let's spread hope, faith, and love.